everybody. Welcome to another episode of Secure the Seat Live. My name is Minda Harts, and I'm happy to be with you on this Monday in December. As you know, I have not gone live on LinkedIn in a couple of months, and so I'm excited to have a final year conversation with someone I adore and respect as a leadership in industry, a global leader, Celeste Warren. That's why you're here, right? To hear us have a conversation about her new book and also just the future of work. I think a lot of us have experienced a lot of different things in our industries. And if we haven't directly experienced it, maybe our spouses or partners or families or friends have experienced a lot of different changes inside the workplace. And so we're going to have a conversation about it. And what I want you to do is, if you're watching primarily on LinkedIn, I want you to tag someone because we want you to invite them into the conversation. I know we have folks watching on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And if you're not able to watch us live, we will see you on the replay. But excited, as I said, to have this conversation and excited to be in community with all of you. So drop us a note in the chat. I'll make sure that I keep an eye on that as well. But I'm going to bring up Celeste. I've known of Celeste for a very long time, but we didn't get a chance to actually start working together until I think it was maybe a year ago, not quite 2 years, at Black Enterprise. They had an event in New York City, and I had the pleasure of moderating a panel that she was on. And from there, she's been stuck with me. And so and so that's just what happens when I orbit in the world of people who I really admire and respect. You just cannot get rid of me. And so she's been a supporter of my work when she was in her former role at Merck. And so let's find out what she's been up to. And so I'm going to bring Celeste to the stage. Hi, Celeste.
Hi, how are you, Minda?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Well, congratulations on your new book, The Truth About Equity. I'll make sure to drop it in the chat so people can get it. But congratulations. It's no small feat to write any book, but a second book at that.
Well, thank you. It was a labor of love, that's for sure.
I love that. Well, I have some questions for you today, but before we get started, I know I have let everyone know in the show notes about all the wonderful things you've done and accomplished and still doing. But in your words, I'd love for you to tell people a little bit more about you and just how you got to be this global icon in corporate America.
Okay. Oh, icon! I'm humbled. Actually, I'm just a small town girl, small steel mill town girl from Western Pennsylvania, and throughout my entire life, equity has been, and diversity and inclusion has been such a strong influence because of my father. He was one of the first Black teachers in Western Pennsylvania. And so seeing the world through his eyes as a child and then growing up throughout adulthood. But this has been a wonderful journey. I never wanted to be a chief diversity and inclusion officer because that was something I was very passionate about. And I just was like, everyone's not going to want to go where I go and feel as passionate about it. But I ended up doing it, and for 10 years with Merck, a global Fortune 100 company, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey, journey of learning, of developing myself, and growing as a professional and personally. And so about 3 years ago, I was thinking, okay, well, what's next? What's in that next chapter? And I started thinking about it and really beginning to prepare, not knowing when the day was going to be, but just beginning to prepare and really make sure that I was thinking about the next chapter. And so lo and behold, 2024 came around and I began preparing my successor and really said, okay, this is the date. This is what I'm going to move forward with, and ended up announcing it in February of this year that I was going to be retiring in July. Announced my successor and begin, really the more detailed preparations while still balancing the work there. And started writing the book in 24. And said, we really needed to get this voice out there, another voice out there around what really is equity and what it isn't. What are the myths surrounding it? And Minda, it was like therapeutic for me because I felt like for years in doing this work, decades really, in doing this work, and it felt like just over the past few years that people were just really, really trying their best to just unravel it and undo work that had been done by so many people to make sure that this was an inclusive world that we lived in, an inclusive nation. And so I really said, okay, I need to really get this book out and start just speaking my truth, and started the consulting company. And it's just been a wonderful journey. And the way people have accepted and embraced me has just been truly, truly liberating.
Well, they trust you. I'm really big on making sure we have trust in the workplace, and your career has demonstrated that people can trust you, right, when they bring you in and hire you. And so I love that for you. Congratulations again. I want to hop right in. We have a bunch of people watching us on LinkedIn, so thank you so much. Make sure you continue to put your comments in. But your book opens with a powerful reminder that equity isn't just preferential treatment, right? I think a lot of people, they get the gold star because they're X, Y, and Z, right? It's progress. From the experience leading global DEI, why do you think equity is still so misunderstood? And what's the simplest way leaders can begin to shift the narrative inside their organizations? And I think that this is so important going into 2026 as people think about what progress looks like instead of what some may feel is like regression, right?
Yeah, there's so much misconception and disinformation about what equity really is. It's not about, and there's a fear, I think, to it as well, because people think it's about, well, you're giving preferential treatment to one group over another group, and that's not what it's about. And in the book I use the analogy around the fence and the rocks that was created by Deloitte. And so the fence and the rock analogy is those rocks in that second illustration, in the middle illustration, are those acts of equity. And it's just basically there to give people equal access to seeing over that fence. And that fence, in my analogy, are all of the isms, the longer term issues that have come around throughout institutions, society, organizations, the racism, sexism, I call them isms, homophobia, xenophobia, all of those different things. They're going to take a longer time to try to dismantle. So we have to put those acts of equity in place. We have to do both of those at the same time. And then also talk to that individual who's still standing on one rock in both those illustrations and explain to them that fence is there. They've always been able to see over it. And then also how the isms manifest themselves to his colleagues on the right who are experiencing this, what it looks like in behaviors in the organization, how that makes them feel. And so once we've had those conversations and that sometimes challenging dialogue, then we need to get them to be active allies, not just they understand it intellectually, but they need to get in the boat, grab an oar, and row with us and help us to tear that fence down. So in that third illustration, we don't need the rocks and we all can see the beautiful mountains ahead. Even that person standing on one rock that they could see over the fence, but now with the fence gone, they can see what's below the mountains, the forest and the trees and all of the other things as well. So that's why I like to give examples around how everyone wins when we get it right.
There's enough rocks to go around.
Yeah.
I mean, there's enough opportunities for everybody. It's not like a zero-sum game. And I love that you demonstrate what that can look like in real time, not just as a fantasy island, right? It can happen. Something else that struck me in the book is you highlight that, and you talked a little bit about it just now, but equity isn't just treating everyone the same, right? And I think people also get kind of confused about that. And it's about giving people the support they actually need. What does that look like for leaders day to day? Because I think, again, they're looking at what are the 10 things I need to do to make sure I'm not, and I think people, they get in their heads too much, and then miss out on the actual work that needs to be done, right?
Absolutely. And it's not as difficult and this sort of nebulous thing that everyone kind of thinks it is. It is exactly the way you've explained it and articulated it. And every day, managers, what they can do to put equity in action is basically something as simple as, okay, I know I have a team of 10, 15 people, whatever the number may be. But in order for that team to function in an optimal way, in the best way as a team, you need to understand the individual skills, capabilities, barriers, obstacles, challenges that each of your individual team member has. And having those one-on-one discussions, because in this day and age where everyone, they're a player coach, but they're more player as opposed to the coach and the manager part. It's like I used to say, some of them think like, well, I'm an individual contributor. I just happen to lead people or manage people. And that's not the way that you need to be thinking about it. You need to optimize the level and the performance of the work that needs to be done through your people. One easy way of doing that is one-on-ones with your individual team members, understanding their skills, their capabilities, their strengths, their areas for development. And then what are some of those obstacles and barriers beyond those four things that are getting in the way of them being able to really perform at an optimal level? And I mean, really getting to know them and understanding them. And you need to do this. And you have the book that's coming out, Talk to Me Nice, about trust, 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 trust. It's so critically important if you want to develop that relationship. And how you do that is through acts of equity, getting to know the person, understanding those obstacles and barriers that are getting in the way of them really being able to be their true, authentic self and be productive as a member of the team. And as you are doing that, then your team will function better and be able to carry off the mission of the organization ultimately. And a lot of managers, Minda, you wouldn't be surprised about this because you studied organizations. They don't even meet one-on-one with their team members. And some of them barely even have staff meetings. The staff meetings, instead of it being a coming together, an inclusive environment where you empower people to speak up and talk about it, because they know more about what's happening on the ground in your organization than you do. And listening to them and having debates and conversations and healthy dialogue. They don't even have that. It's not even a productive conversation. It's like one directional, telling them what to do this week. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. And these are some of the things that you need to do if you want to put equity in action. It's that's that intersection too about trust and equity.
People are loving everything. They're telling us more of what they're finding too. Something that you touched on, and I hope you don't mind me kind of digging into something that you said a little bit more, but you mentioned how some leaders today or managers feel like it's not their role to be the coach, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that part of this, and I see it a lot with especially communities, well, I'll just say it, sometimes even with Black women in particular in the workplace, is maybe their manager does not give them feedback, right? Or there's some type of, where they don't talk to them unless they really have to, not because they don't like them or whatever, but because they haven't had enough experience maybe coaching and having conversations, or the conversation feels more forced. And I'm just wondering, how do we kind of bridge that gap? And I know exactly what this looks like in terms of how we can prepare people going into reviews in the new year, right? Like, so that there isn't that guilt or fear or overcorrection, because when we don't give feedback in a way that enhances trust, then people don't get the opportunity for growth, right? And I think that part of that is realizing that, yes, if Celeste is one of my favorites on the team, it's easier for me to connect with you and coach you, right? But what about for the people who I haven't yet made my favorites, which there shouldn't be any favoritism, right? Because that's erosions of trust. But maybe you could talk to those people who are having a hard time with coaching everybody, right? Not just their favorites. I'll say it that way.
It's not complex. You need to be very diligent around making sure that you're taking the time to meet individually with your team members. And so, looking at your calendar, and I'm getting very pragmatic here, looking at your calendar, if you look at your weekly calendar, month or whatever, and really look at how many times you are sitting down and having conversations with your team members, how many times you're meeting with your team collectively. There are external studies and studies within organizations that actually have looked at how many times the manager meets with their team and in correlating that to effective performance as a team in the workplace. And I tell you, the more frequently you meet with your team individually and as a team, the better and more high performing team that they're going to be. And that has been proven over and over and over again. I mean, I've experienced it myself. And so, making sure that you take the time to do it, every single team member, because they each are on your team for a reason. It's sort of like I hate to use sports analogies, but it's like any sports team. Everybody has their individual position, but together collectively, the team functions well. And so you need to understand who's your best pitcher, who's your best first baseman, who's your best third baseman, and really make sure that you understand that and are helping them to develop. It's almost like a contract. You were hired into the organization, maybe years ago, or you're part of your career earlier on, you were an individual leader, individual contributor. You were a great, engineer or operator or salesperson. But now you need to take those skills and sort of turn them around and really say, okay, how do I use my knowledge of how I do things, learn from other people, but also contribute to helping them get better. And then also from a systemic organizational standpoint, leaders need to really look at their people policies, practices, procedures, talent management, talent acquisition, talent development, and really make sure that it's an inclusive process. Performance management, as you said, Minda, make sure that it's an inclusive process that they've, and I say this very nicely, but ripped out as much of the bias as you can out of these processes. So managers, when they're doing the work, that they can do it in a way that is inclusive, that it's effective, and is going to make an impact on the organization. That's the easiest way. And managers need to understand it is not HR's job to manage and develop and lead your people. It's your job. And you need to seek their help and coaching and assistance, but it's your job. And if you don't understand that, then maybe you need to go back to being an individual contributor. And I say that kindly, but it's the truth.
Amen and amen. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And you're right. I think sometimes the scapegoat is just to put it on HR, right? But there is a reason why we're in that position as well. Just like you mentioned that those teammates are on our team for a reason. We're their coach for a reason, right? So let's all play the game as best as we can, right? I love that. One of the things that I know that we cannot not talk about is the moment that we're in. And I know so many companies are stepping away from or have stepped away from DEI work. Yet your book argues that equity unlocks innovation, leadership, and long-term success. What would you tell organizations that still feel that hesitation?
Well, the first thing I would say is what was illegal diversity, equity, and inclusion practices before January 21st are still illegal today. That's the Civil Rights Act. You can't discriminate based on race, sexual orientation, gender, etc. That the law is the law. That hasn't changed. And so organizations need to understand that. And in this day and age, equity is so critically important because you want to make sure that you're maximizing the performance of everyone in your organization, which contributes to the optimization of your organization successfully. If you're able to take an individual, understand what they do well, what they don't do well, blow out all the obstacles that are in their way and the barriers that are in the way by talking to them and asking them what's getting in the way, helping them to succeed. That's basic manager and leadership 101. That's how you go from being a good manager to a great manager, from a good leader to a great leader. And that's the importance of it. Understanding that you have to do different things for different people to optimize their level of performance, because we're not robots. We're individual people. Our identities are very we're a lot of different things. I'm not just a woman. I'm a Black woman. I'm a mom. I'm a former executive. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm, all of these different things wrapped into and embodied into one person. And so in the workplace, you need to understand that. And there's so much creativity and innovation and ideation that comes from individuals that you just have to unlock it and empower them to be able to do what they need to do in the organization. I have seen it so many times, Minda, where someone is sitting in a corner somewhere, no one's paying any attention to them. They're just doing their work. They're leaving and going home at the end of the day. Nobody has just looked into that person and said, what is that untapped potential? What is it that we're not reaching with that individual? And when we do that, oh my gosh, the opportunities, and what do they call it? They call it you think about a trajectory that an organization goes through, and they lose that extra effort from individuals, where instead of the trajectory going here, it could be going here, because you don't have that extra effort that people want to put in, but nobody sort of unleashed it from them.
I mean, yes and yes. I'm just over here like in my own mind. Yes, yes, yes. And it like you said, it's not rocket science. We don't need $1 trillion initiative for us to activate this afternoon, right? This is right now after the LinkedIn Live. I know you teased some out, but I'm curious for those who definitely need the step by step. Of course, they're going to get your book, but what are, like, I know you talk about the acts of equity. What are a couple that people could do in this case to start implementing?
Well, one thing is, let's say you're a manager, you have a team of, 10 people or whatever, and you find out that one of the individuals in their personal life, they have a special needs child. And they've been afraid to let you know that they've been masking it or covering it, that they have to leave at certain times to be able to take care of that child, or they need a hybrid type work arrangement, and the way that they're working right now isn't working for them. How do you meet their needs to be able to say, okay, let's work together so you can still take care of that child, and we can also make sure that you are optimizing your performance at work as well. And being able to say that. A lot of people, they don't know that what people are going through. That's one, pragmatic example. If we stay on, let's go back to 2020. There was a lot of things that were going on in the environment with the murder of George Floyd. Excuse me. And I know that people reached out to me and said, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? I can empathize. I can't maybe understand exactly what you're going through because I'm not African American. But I can, talk to me. My door is open if you want to talk. Just those little acts really make it, you show that you're building trust with those individuals. But those are just a couple of things that come to mind for me.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And that's, I'll do a little bit of talking, give you a chance to do that. But what you're saying is so important. And I think it's a good reminder for each of us, because because we might have shown trust yesterday, we might fall flat today, right? It's a continuous evolution of ourselves. Relationships change. I might say or do something in the next 30 seconds that I didn't intend to, erode trust, but because I'm not being sympathetic or empathetic, right? Or I'm not listening to understand. There's so many different things. And I think you mentioned a really good example of someone who would probably be a little nervous and scared to have that conversation, to be vulnerable, right? And that should be a safe place as a leader for us to say, oh, I appreciate you telling me that. Let's figure out what this could look like, right? So that you could still optimize for success and we still, the business still functions the way that it needs to. And that conversation can happen, right? But there's so many missed opportunities and gaps that never take place because that trust is so fragile. And that leads me to the next question is trust and equity, they go hand in hand, right? It's so important. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, how does trust intersect with equity, and how can leaders use trust building behaviors to create the kind of environments that we're talking about?
Yeah, equity cannot exist until you establish trust. When I think about taking it into, the business aspect of it, in a marketing strategy, you have to understand your customers. You have to understand all of your customers. Customer segmentation is critical in the marketing world today, especially today, because there's so much segmentation in the marketplace out there. And so in order to understand your customer, you have to not just interpret what you think they need or how they're going to need your product or your service, but you have to go in and you have to establish a relationship with that customer segment. And you can't just, go into their community and pop up a table with a big sign on it that says, trust me. You have to really develop a relationship, and that starts with trust. That starts with developing, understanding what they're going through, understanding how your product or your service is going to impact them, understand where you're missing the mark. And you can do that by going into those communities. And don't start with, let me sell my product, but you start with, let me understand you. Let me understand what your needs are. And then you can establish that relationship and that trust and be able to meet their needs with the services or the products that you provide.
Absolutely. I love that. And relationship building, I know we all may not know each other for decades, but there is a way in which we can, right, go into a situation where it's not just, what do I have to say? What do I have to sell? Right. I love that from a marketing perspective. And I think that we can build more trust, more equity when we think about people as stakeholders, as humans first, yes. Right? And not robots yet. So I think that's important. I could ask you questions all day, Celeste, but we're almost at time. But I'm just wondering, for those who have had a hard year, right, in the workplace, they're not as optimistic as maybe some of us going into the next year. What are one or two pieces of advice you can give to just help make the workplace better than we found it? Because we made a lot of inroads, and then it may feel a little stifled in some cases. But I do believe that our best days are ahead when we have leaders like you giving us some tools for how we thrive and not just survive. But I would love for you just to talk to those folks who are disenchanted, for rightfully so, right, or lost their jobs this year because of some of this lack of empathy and humanity in the workplace. So would love for you to just talk to those folks today.
Minda, I was speaking at a conference last month, and during the audience Q&A, a young lady got up, and I was so proud of the fact that she got up in front of his audience of about 600-700 people. And she got up and she said, basically distilled the question down to, are we going to be okay? And I told her, I said, it's times like this where people will be looking at not just your employees, but your shareholders, your customers. They're going to be looking at you to see how your leadership, what you do as a leader during these times. And, it's easy to be a good leader during times of prosperity. But in these times where we're challenging equity, where we're challenging inclusion, where we're rolling back those things that are literally the essence of people, it's during these times that people are looking and they're saying, okay, what type of a leader were you during times such as this? What type of an organization were you during times such as this? And, you know, as you know, our parents and our grandparents say, this too shall pass. And the pendulum is going to swing in another way in a few years. And so, but people will remember what you did, how you acted during this time. And when you try to go back to, oh, well, you know, I want to embrace diversity and inclusion again, you can't do that because you've already eroded the trust of your employees, of your customers, of your shareholders. And so this is the time where you need to be able to make sure that you are acting in the best interest of your employees, your organization, you're demonstrating inclusion, and you are being an inclusive leader, because people are going to watch. And when you code switch during times like this and then try to switch it back when the times get better, no one is going to trust you. No one is going to trust you. So times will, you know, history has told us that when there's been a time of social activism and a rise in social activism, as we saw in 2020, the pendulum swings back years later to a time of conservatism. So we're in that time now. The pendulum is going to swing back. So just do what you need to do to not just thrive, but survive. Focus on your skills and your capabilities. Focus on your individual leadership, because everyone is a leader. And, and really plot your journey through this time and focus on those things that you can change.
That was fantastic advice. And shout out to that person who stepped up to the mic.